U.S. Congress was no stranger to the disruption caused by the pandemic. Changes put in place over the past 20 months to allow lawmakers to work remotely may also be here to stay. Joining me now to discuss Washington's new work culture is Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon, a Democrat from Pennsylvania and member of the Future Work Caucus. Congresswoman Scanlon, great to see you. Tell us about the future work. And again, I come back to this thing, say, if we were to kind of, zero base or zero budget this thing and figure out, okay, let's draw the economy we want to have. Forget where we're at for a moment. I'd just be interested what features you think are missing that would make this country a lot healthier than it is.
Well, I think it's hard to forget where we are right now because
you don't have to totally forget.
Really provided that opportunity to reflect and think about where we need to go. I mean, the pandemic caused a lot of our economy to take some really giant leaps in terms of telemedicine, telework, remote learning, et cetera, and really pushed us into a new space. But at the same time, it exposed some real gaps that were already there, but made them worse. So whether it's those who don't have access to reliable internet, and it's not just rural areas. I have a more urban district, but we have a lot of people who can't afford to have internet in their home. And as many of your commentators earlier in the show have mentioned, the impact on women because they tend to be primary child care givers has been huge. So the fact that we haven't yet gotten out of the pandemic, kids are just starting to be able to get vaccinated. That means that school and childcare is still dicey and people can't reliably get into work. But also we've lost so many childcare providers through the pandemic that we really need to invest in there. I think we talked about some of your prior speakers talked about the fact that the rest of the world does better. Our competitors in the world do better with removing obstacles to work, whether it's making sure that there's childcare and elder care, making sure that we're doing workforce development. So those are the things that I like to focus on and really make sure that we are in a position to move forward and be competitive in the global market.
Why do you think, this is an unfair question. I used to say this is a meta question, but I feel like now I can't say meta without Facebook coming to mind. But,
oh, no.
But I want to ask a question, which is, we talk so much about the impact of COVID that has shown the disproportionate burden and share of deaths, ailments, infections in communities of color, depending on where your zip code is, and these kind of issues. We've also talked a lot about gender disparity and racism, systemic racism in America. Why? I just am really interested in why we can't shift into patterns that reflect more of where other healthier nations in the world is, say Scandinavia or much of Europe. Why do we have so much baggage? We seem like, just take gender equity for a moment. Why do we continue to have a situation where women make so much less than men in the same positions? Why aren't we taking this moment and saying we need to change the game and stop stacking the deck against people who want to work and be in this? So I know I'm asking you a big question, but it does frustrate me.
Frustrates you. Frustrates me. I mean, one of the interesting things as we grapple with this, we talk about so much about the fact that there's a pay gap for women, a wage gap, but the fact that that leads into a wealth gap over time, that women have, I think it's only about 30% of the wealth of men over time because of the pay gap that builds up. And then you layer into the fact that many women leave the workforce for a period of time when they have children. So it makes it more difficult to retire. It makes it more difficult to have free funds to invest in different ventures or to pay for education. So there's a lot there. There are things that we're trying to promote as ideas, and I think we can learn from countries around the world. I saw a statistic recently that most developed nations invest about 2.6% of their GDP in children. U.S. only invests about 0.6%. So we're well behind, again, our competitors in terms of removing those barriers. And you mentioned the kind of disparities that exist, because of race or gender or whatever. The pandemic really has had an outsized impact on the intersection of those things. Study just came out about 140,000 children in the country have lost their primary or secondary caregiver because of COVID. And most of those kids are children in minority communities. So, they have lost a parent. If they're in a single parent home, that means they're now receiving childcare from someone else. They're with other relatives. So there's a layering on here that really makes the impact exponentially harder in some communities.
It just makes me think that we're going to be talking about these issues for a lot longer, that there are no silver bullets to just solve trauma in the way you're raised, right? So you're really talking about trauma. But let me ask you, you mentioned communities, cities. I know you represent part of Philadelphia. And oftentimes, I think there's a mistake in the way we frame the digital divide, that we look at it as an rural-urban divide. But it's so much more than that. We have pockets in cities with people that are not connected, do not have broadband at home, have a wobbliness in that area. And this is the United States of America. I just don't understand it. But it is one of these issues. And I'm just wondering now, as we kind of been fascinated by this soap opera about the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better bill, let's take infrastructure for a quick moment. Is that going to solve the human connectivity problem with getting young people and everyone connected so that they can at least be online? I mean, there are other challenges after that, but is that going to fix it?
Well, there are billions of dollars for broadband in the infrastructure bill and for reducing the cost to get online. And that's been a huge issue in my district. And as you mentioned, there are in urban areas still places that are not wired for connectivity, but the bigger issue is affordability. And there's an estimate that 20 to 25% of my district does not have, folks don't have a computer at home that they can use. And when you're talking about kids having to get education online, people having to apply for jobs or benefits online, that's a huge, huge problem. And we risk having a country that really has kind of a digital apartheid, and we can't afford that. We can't afford to leave people behind that way as we move more and more to an online economy.
And just finally, real quickly, then we have a question from the audience for you. Does I've been watching Build Back Better when Bernie Sanders was talking about a $10 trillion version, then there was the $6 trillion version, then 3.5, we're now down to 1.75. Is there enough in it that you still care about, that it's worth supporting? How do you think it's going to go?
Oh my gosh, I totally care about it. And, very eager to do as much good as we can with what we are able to push through a reluctant Senate. The child care provisions are in the Build Back Better bill. There's a ton of money in there for veterans. There's money for workforce development. A lot of the things we're talking about today are contained in the Build Back Better package. The rough characterization is that the infrastructure bill that passed last week has the hard infrastructure, but then this one has the infrastructure that we need to make sure that everybody's taking part in our economy. And does at least start doing some of the very necessary things that we need to do, including lowering prescription drug prices. Hard to find anyone who doesn't think we need to do something about that.
Well, good. That's great. Well, we have a question for you, Congresswoman, from Beth Kuhn. Beth?
Hello, my name is Beth Kuhn. I'm a workforce futurist with Stonegate Strategies and former state official. And my question today is, how might we more quickly and more forcefully move government agencies and programs forward into the future of work realities to better assist individuals and employers? Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Well, I participated in a program yesterday that I think is a model for that. It's the Philadelphia Pipeline Project. It's a collaboration between the Navy. We have a shipyard here. We have a lot of manufacturers who work on our submarine fleet. So it's got national defense as well as maritime commerce aspects to it. The Navy has partnered with our local manufacturers and with local community colleges, technical schools, to make sure that we are recruiting and training young people with the skills that the employers in the region need. And it's a really fabulous model. There's been some success elsewhere in the country. I think there was a program in Virginia, but we've just brought it to Philadelphia. I attended a welding competition yesterday with 32 young welders who got to showcase their skills and then apply for jobs. And these are kids in high school and, looking at walking out the door and into jobs that, start at $18 an hour and go up rapidly from there. So good wages, full benefits, and lots of opportunity to build careers. So I think doing a better job of connecting government to private enterprise and to our communities and the educational opportunities is a great place to start, and we're doing it here.
Well, Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon, member of the Future Work Caucus, a resident of Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, which I love Swarthmore, so we'll have to, meet up there one day. Thank you so much for talking to us. This issue is not going to go away. There's so many other dimensions to it as I think about particularly how we upskill, how we credential, how we make, with the previous Congresswoman we were talking about how we remove the stigma of lifelong education, which we ought to begin. How do we remove ageism? There's a lot of dimensions to this that I think we could talk about in the future. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you. Great to talk about it.